"Doc, we need you now." Sullivan's voice rang out amidst the gunfire echoing through the Afghan village. Sarah Martinez, 28, sprinted through a hail of bullets, her heavy medical pack strapped tight, saving each falling comrade. Her hands, once accustomed to stitching wounds, were now soaked in blood, her heart pounding not just from fear, but from a terrifying question. How could she save them when the enemy lurked in the high tower, each shot as precise as a reaper's scythe? Thompson, the veteran sniper, turned to her with heavy eyes. "It's time, Doc. Take the rifle." Sarah froze. She'd never killed anyone, but if she didn't pull the trigger, everyone would die. And that was the moment her life veered forever onto a different path. The last sliver of moonlight over the Afghan sky faded, giving way to a silvery gray glow of dawn. The biting cold swept through the mountain slopes, dry and silent, as if the entire world held its breath. In that darkness, a team of 7 moved quietly. No words, no wasted steps, only shadows blending into the rock and earth, gliding like ghosts. At the center was Lieutenant Colonel Jake Sullivan, his rugged face carved by decades of warfare. His icy blue eyes darted constantly, mapping routes in his mind, calculating every escape path, every angle of fire. Beside him, Sarah Martinez carried a heavy medical backpack, the familiar weight of morphine, scalpels, and bandages pressed painfully into her shoulders. Yet that weight brought a strange comfort. It was the toolkit of a healer, the only weapon she trusted. The night before, as they prepared to leave the base, Sarah had felt something off. It wasn't just because this was her 3rd deployment, but because this time her team wasn't a typical group of soldiers. They were SEALs, 6 men who moved as if they shared a single breath. Every motion was precise, like a wordless symphony where each instrument played in perfect harmony. Petty Officer First Class Mike Rodriguez, the communications specialist, carried a complex radio system on his back, its antenna rising like a metallic spine. Occasionally, he glanced back at Sarah, a tired smile flickering under his helmet, a young father who'd just welcomed his first daughter. He always carried a small photo in his vest pocket, and during a training session, he'd shown it to Sarah, his eyes shining with pride mixed with fear. Chief Petty Officer Tom Anderson, the explosives expert, moved with deliberate caution. His eyes constantly scanned the ground for anomalies, hidden wires in the sand, or glints of metal under moonlight. His large, steady hands could dismantle a bomb as easily as peeling an apple. He'd once told Sarah, "In this job, there are 2 kinds of mistakes. Small ones cost you a finger. Big ones cost you the team." Leading the way was Danny Kim, the youngest scout, only 22. His nickname Hawkeyes was no accident. Those eyes had once spotted an ambush from an impossible distance, saving the entire team from certain death. Kim moved swiftly, his steps light as a cat's, carbine at the ready. Though young, he carried an absolute focus, as if the world beyond the mission ceased to exist. Carlos Santos, the urban warfare specialist, was a solid figure. He'd survived dozens of firefights in narrow alleys and dark houses, where every brick could conceal an enemy. He'd once shared stories of his Mexican grandmother, who taught him to make tamales. Amid the smoke and fire of war, he still remembered the smell of her kitchen. And then there was David Thompson, the hardest for Sarah to read. A legendary sniper, his record of precise shots earned the respect of the entire Special Forces community. He spoke little, his weathered face and steel-gray eyes unyielding. The rifle on his shoulder wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of his body. To Thompson, every bullet was an absolute decision, and he never missed. But what surprised Sarah was this. During training, he'd patiently sat with her, teaching her how to hold a rifle, how to control her breathing, like a gentle mentor. "Your steady hands," he'd said. "They're the hands of a natural-born sniper." Sarah remembered those early mornings, when the team was still asleep, standing with Thompson at the range. He likened pulling the trigger to inserting an IV, telling her a single wrong move could mean life or death. Those lessons felt alien, yet strangely logical to her medical mind. She never imagined they'd one day be put to use. Tonight, as they approached a village nestled between two mountains, Sarah felt the world go still. Mud brick houses loomed faintly under the moonlight. From a distance, she could see thin wisps of chimney smoke, hear children's laughter carried on the wind. The scene was so peaceful it could fool anyone into thinking war had never touched this place. But Sarah had learned that in Afghanistan, peace was rarely truly peaceful. Sullivan raised a fist, signaling a halt. The team froze, as if the air itself had solidified. He turned, his eyes scanning each face, conveying the plan with sharp gestures. 3 prongs of attack, simultaneous entry, swift capture, and clean extraction. No gunfire. If possible, a textbook operation. Precise and clean. Sarah took a deep breath. She checked her radio one last time, her fingers brushing the earpiece as if it were a fragile lifeline. In her backpack were bandages, morphine, hemostatic agents, everything to counter casualties. But in another compartment, she knew, was a backup sniper rifle. Thompson had placed it there, just in case. The ghostly team advanced into the village. Sarah felt her heartbeat sync with their steps. A storm was brewing, but none of them yet knew how much it would sweep away. The village grew clearer as the seals crept along the mountainside, dawn's light beginning to illuminate the mud-roofed houses. Sarah squinted through her dust scarf, studying the village's layout. The houses formed a circle around a central courtyard, like ancient sentinels standing guard for centuries. Children played, their laughter echoing in the early breeze. Chimney smoke traced faint ribbons against the sky, a scene so ordinary it was almost lulling. But that very peace made Sarah uneasy. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. In past missions, she'd seen how death often hid behind the most harmless walls. She gripped her backpack straps tighter, a chill running down her spine. Sullivan signaled again. The 3 assault teams split off. Rodriguez and Kim joined Sullivan, approaching from the north. Anderson and Santos moved along the western wall. Thompson and Sarah held the eastern flank, with a wider vantage point. Everyone moved swiftly, silently, with short, decisive motions. Sarah's heart pounded in rhythm with Sullivan's commanding gestures. The target was in a large house at the center. A Taliban commander, responsible for multiple attacks, was now only steps away. Sullivan signaled. The wooden door was forced open. A flurry of motion followed shouts. A brief struggle. Then silence. In mere seconds, the target was secured. Sarah exhaled. Everything had gone according to plan. But in that moment, hell broke loose. An explosion roared from a nearby house. Dust and sand erupted, swallowing the light. Then came gunfire, fierce and relentless, like a storm unleashed from every direction. Windows, rooftops, narrow alleys all flashed with muzzle fire. Bullets tore through the air, slamming into mud walls with sharp cracks. Sarah flinched, pressing herself against a stone wall, her heart pounding like it would burst her chest. They'd been ambushed. Intelligence had failed. It wasn't just the target. At least 30 fighters were here, positioned and ready, waiting for this exact moment. Rodriguez shouted into the radio, his voice breaking through the gunfire. "Contact! Emergency contact! We're ambushed!" Sarah glanced around. Sullivan rolled behind an overturned cart, firing short bursts, maintaining control. Anderson yelled, pointing to an alley, "IED! Stay clear of that wall." Santos dragged Kim, shielding the young scout. Thompson lay flat behind a low wall, his sniper rifle tracking rooftop flashes, each shot silencing an enemy weapon. Sarah's breaths came fast. The gunfire around her felt like the air itself was exploding. She spotted a wounded civilian crumpled near the courtyard entrance. Without thinking, she rushed forward. Her hands slid through the dust as she knelt, checking for a pulse. Warm blood soaked her gloves. But then, a new burst of gunfire erupted, grazing her ear. Dust and debris rained onto her hair. Sullivan shouted, "Hold your positions, we're surrounded." Sarah scanned the chaos gunfire from every direction. Shouts in a language she didn't understand. A deadly symphony. The acrid smell of gunpowder choked her throat. Kim, breaking from Santos's cover, fired back and then collapsed. A desperate cry crackled through the radio. "Medic, we have a man down!" Sarah froze. The young scout lay 20 meters away, blood staining his uniform red. His body twitched, eyes wild with panic. In that fleeting moment, time seemed to stop. The gunfire faded, replaced by the thud of her own heartbeat. Without another thought, she sprang up. Her backpack bounced with each step. Bullets whizzed by, striking walls, kicking up dirt. She ran, her body torn between fear and the instinct to save. Reaching Kim, she dropped beside him, immediately assessing the wound. The bullet had hit his shoulder, dangerous but not arterial. Blood poured, but it was manageable. Sarah pressed gauze onto the wound, blood soaking it instantly. Kim groaned, his eyes wavering, searching hers for reassurance. Sarah whispered, her voice firm, "You're going to be okay. Look at me. Breathe. Don't give up." Across the courtyard, Santos screamed as a bullet hit his leg, collapsing him. Thompson roared, his rifle firing again, covering his team. Sullivan shouted into the radio, his voice taut as steel, "Hold the line, don't let them close in." Sarah kept pressure on Kim's wound, her palms burning with blood. She knew she'd just stepped into a true nightmare. This wasn't just a capture mission. It was a fight for survival. And she, the doctor who believed scalpels were her only weapon, was now in the heart of a bullet storm. Santos's scream echoed across the mud-brick courtyard, sharper than the gunfire. Sarah, still holding the bandage on Kim's shoulder, glanced toward her teammate, Carlos Santos. The burly man who'd shared stories of his grandmother's tamales, lay sprawled, his left leg drenched in blood. Dust swirled around him as bullets tore into the ground nearby. Without hesitation, Sarah secured Kim's bandage, locking the combat gauze in place, then sprinted to Santos. Her steps faltered on the uneven, debris-strewn ground. Each stride was a gamble, with death as bullets sliced the air. She slid beside Santos, the metallic smell of blood hitting her nose. The bullet had torn through his thigh, not shattering bone but ripping muscle severely. Blood pulsed out, soaking the dirt. Sarah pressed gauze down hard, her hands trembling under the pressure, but her movements remained precise. "You'll live," she said softly, her voice oddly calm as her eyes tracked bullet trails. Santos gritted his teeth, sweat pouring, his eyes filled with pain but absolute trust. Above, Sullivan shouted orders, his voice urgent amid the gunfire. "Anderson, cover the west. Rodriguez, call for the chopper now." Rodriguez hunched over the radio, struggling to get a signal through the chaos. His voice broke, requesting urgent air support. "We're surrounded. Enemy numbers overwhelming." But Sarah knew, even if the chopper arrived, they could die here. The real threat was the sniper on the minaret tower. Every time a SEAL peeked out, a bullet forced them back. The tower loomed, a deathly eye overlooking the courtyard. Thompson pressed against a low wall, his rifle barking shot after shot. But Sarah saw it, he was firing hastily. His angle was limited, his sightline obstructed. Each shot only forced the enemy to pause, not eliminate the sniper controlling the battlefield. "I can't lock him," Thompson growled, his voice rare with frustration. "He knows how to hide. And every time I aim, he's gone." Sarah glanced at the tower. In the dim morning light, she saw flashes from a narrow window. A skilled, patient, calculated sniper. He didn't fire recklessly. He chose targets, one shot at a time, pinning the SEALs into a deadly corner. Blood from Santos's wound spread across Sarah's hands. She pressed harder, but her mind couldn't escape the cold reality. They were running out of strength. Ammo was dwindling. Casualties were mounting. And every passing minute, the sniper tightened his grip. Sullivan leaned out from behind the overturned cart, sweat streaming down. A long gash from a bullet fragment bled across his forehead. He shouted, his voice tinged with desperation, "If we don't take him out, we're all dead here." Those words pierced Sarah. She looked back at Kim, slumped with his bandaged shoulder, breathing heavily. Then at Santos, lips tight with pain but fighting to stay silent. Rodriguez clung to the radio, pleading for help. Anderson distributed ammo, his face grim. All of them, looking to Sullivan, fighting to the end. And then, Sarah's eyes met Thompson's. The legendary sniper, now looking helpless. He crouched, wiping sweat, still gripping his rifle but with no clear target. Their gazes locked for a moment. Sarah remembered those early mornings. Thompson's hands guiding her with the rifle. His steady voice, natural point of aim. Your heartbeat sets the shot. Don't let your mind waver. Those memories flooded back, not as lessons, but as a grim warning. What he taught might be the only thing to save them today. She bit her lip, securing Santos's bandage, but the thought pounded in her head. If I don't act, they'll die. I'm a doctor. I save lives. But how? A bullet whizzed by her ear. Debris exploded. Santos cried out as a brick fragment hit his shoulder. Sullivan shouted into the radio, his voice like a hammer. We need that sniper down. Whatever it takes. Sarah froze. Whatever it takes. The words weighed heavy. Her Hippocratic oath trembled within her. All her life, she'd believed in doing no harm. But now, if she kept only pressing gauze, praying, and bandaging, the harm would come to everyone she was trying to save. Thompson's eyes stayed on the tower. He knew the truth, and perhaps he knew what Sarah was thinking. In a fleeting moment amid the chaos, he gave a slight nod. Not a command, not an urging, just an acknowledgement. Sometimes, to save lives, you must cross a line you swore never to cross. Sarah felt her hands shake. Not from fear, but from knowing this decision would change everything. Dust swirled thickly across the courtyard, mingling with the stench of gunpowder and blood. So heavy each breath felt like swallowing fire. Sarah held Santos's wound, but her eyes drifted to the backpack against the wall. Inside, beside the gauze and morphine, was something she'd sworn never to use. The backup sniper rifle Thompson had quietly given her. Another bullet screamed overhead, striking the wall with a chilling crack. Kim groaned in shock, his breathing ragged. Rodriguez kept shouting into the radio, desperate for a stable frequency. Sullivan gritted his teeth, forehead bleeding, firing back to hold the line. But Sarah saw it all, their efforts were temporary. As long as the sniper on the tower lived, their chances of escape were slim. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. Her old oaths echoed. Primum non nocere first. Do no harm. But now, not acting was causing harm. Not firing meant watching her team fall one by one. Sarah released Santos's wound, handing the gauze to Anderson to maintain pressure. She lunged for her backpack, unzipping the side compartment. The black steel of the sniper rifle gleamed, heavy, alien, yet eerily familiar. Its parts were assembled with precision, like a supreme medical tool. But this tool didn't save directly. It took away. Thompson crawled closer, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, they needed no words. He understood. She understood. And that silence was the most dangerous agreement. "Doc," he finally said, his voice hoarse but steady. "You sure?" Sarah took a deep breath, her chest heaving. She didn't dare think of the cost she'd pay later. Only the present mattered. Only Kim, Santos, Rodriguez, Sullivan, the people depending on her. Sure. Her voice came out dry, but her eyes no longer wavered. Thompson nodded, quickly pulling out auxiliary components. He helped her attach the bipod, adjust the strap, the practiced motions of a seasoned marksman. But this time, Sarah's hands would pull the trigger. The rifle lay in her hands, cold and heavy. Its weight was nothing like her medical pack. One carried life, the other, death. But now, the two merged, forcing her to accept they were two sides of the same coin. Thompson whispered, leaning close so his voice cut through the gunfire. Remember what I taught you. Natural point of aim. Keep your shoulders steady. Inhale. Exhale. Find your body's pause. Sarah dropped prone behind the low wall, resting the rifle on its bipod. She pressed her cheek to the stock, peering through the scope. The world transformed. The village was no longer a chaotic blur. Through the clear lens, every detail sharpened, cracks in the walls, dust in the air, and far off the narrow window on the minaret tower, where the enemy hid. A flash sparked. His bullet cut through the air, forcing Sullivan to press tighter to cover. Sarah tracked the movement, her heart racing. She saw him expose his left shoulder for a split second, then vanish. The cycle repeated, every 15 seconds. He has a rhythm, Sarah murmured, as if analyzing a surgery. Left shoulder exposed, then gone. Always 15 seconds. Thompson glanced at her, his gray eyes flickering with surprise. Good catch, Doc. Exactly right. Use it. Sarah inhaled deeply, her hands gripping the rifle. In that moment, she was neither doctor nor novice sniper. She was both, fused in a trembling but resolute body. Thompson's lessons echoed like a second heartbeat in her chest. Outside, the battle raged. Kim groaned in shock. Santos gritted his teeth against pain. Rodriguez shouted for rescue. Sullivan fired frantically. And Sarah, for the first time in her life, prepared to save them not just with healing hands, but with a single bullet. Sweat rolled down her temple, dripping onto the rifle stock. Her heart pounded, but her breathing slowed. Inhale. Exhale. The world beyond faded, leaving only the scope and the target. The scope was clear as a still lake. Sarah held her breath, her heart thumping wildly. In the small circular view, the world narrowed to the minaret's narrow window and the enemy's silhouette. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a predator confident in his dominance. Time stretched impossibly. Gunfire, shouts, dust all blurred away. Only her breathing and the sight remained. Sarah felt blood pulse in her ears, like a drum signaling. Thompson whispered, his voice a distant rhythm. Inhale, exhale, hold the rhythm. Squeeze the trigger like placing a scalpel. Sarah focused. The enemy's left shoulder emerged. The moment arrived. Her finger tightened slowly, deliberately, not jerking, like the familiar motion of inserting an IV. The shot rang out. The rifle recoiled, but her steady form absorbed it. Through the scope, she saw the enemy's body jerk back. His rifle clattered against the stone frame, then vanished from sight. For a second, the world went silent. Sarah's body froze. She had done what she'd spent her life avoiding. Then reality crashed back like a tidal wave. Sullivan shouted, "He's down, move up." The team snapped to life. No longer pinned by the sniper, they surged from cover. Anderson swept the alley with his weapon. Santos, despite his wound, struggled up to fire back. Rodriguez kept coordinating. The Taliban, caught off guard, faltered in disarray. Thompson's rifle roared again, now with full force. He seized the opening, picking off targets. Sarah saw the minaret tower, once the sniper's perch, now silent. A dark window, like an empty eye socket. She lowered the rifle, her hands trembling. Only Thompson noticed her shoulders shake slightly. His hand rested on her shoulder, firm and heavy. Dead on. Couldn't have been better. Sarah didn't respond. She looked at her hands. Hands that had saved hundreds, now having taken a life. In her mind, cold metal clashed, like chains tightening around her soul. But out there, the results were clear. Without the sniper's suppression, the SEALs turned the tide. They fired in organized bursts, moving swiftly. The Taliban began retreating, groups disappearing into dark alleys, leaving bodies behind. Rodriguez shouted into the radio, "Chopper's 10 minutes out! Hold fast!" Sarah forced herself to focus. She set the rifle down, returning to Santos. Blood still seeped, but the gauze held. She checked Kim, ensuring his pulse was stable. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched them, but her medical instincts regained their precision. Inside, two currents twisted. "I saved them with that shot, but I also killed." Sullivan crawled to her, breathing heavily, blood still trickling from his forehead. He looked into her eyes, no words needed. His heavy nod was acknowledgement. That shot had saved the team. The gunfire tapered off. The Taliban retreated deeper into the mountains. The air grew thick with the stench of smoke, dust, and blood. Sarah leaned against the wall, the rifle beside her, silent like a curse. She looked up at the sky. The distant thrum of helicopter rotors began to echo. Evac was coming. But instead of relief, her chest felt heavy as stone. In her memory, Sarah saw the enemy's face through the scope. His eyes wide in that final moment, a human. With a story, a family, memories. Then those eyes went dark, because of her single motion. Thompson spoke softly beside her. "Don't dwell on it now. You saved the team." But Sarah knew. Tonight, when silence returned, she wouldn't escape that image. The helicopter roared as it landed. Rotor wash kicked up dust, stinging Sarah's eyes. She bent down, helping load Kim and Santos onto stretchers. Their bodies trembled, but they were alive. That was the only thing she clung to keep from collapsing. As the chopper lifted off, leaving the ravaged village behind, Sarah looked back one last time. The minaret stood alone, a silent witness to the moment her life veered forever. The helicopter shook in the early wind, its rotors drowning out all sound. Inside the cramped cabin, Sarah knelt beside Kim, securing the makeshift four she'd placed on the battlefield. Across from her, Santos lay with his leg tightly bandaged, his face contorted in pain but his eyes open, fighting to prove he hadn't given up. Rodriguez pressed the radio to his ear, reporting the situation. Sullivan leaned against the metal wall, rifle still in hand, his gaze fixed on the open door as if expecting the Taliban to follow them into the sky. Thompson sat quietly, his rifle across his lap, occasionally glancing at Sarah. Each time their eyes met, her heart tightened. No one spoke of the shot, but the truth hung in the air, heavy as a shadow. They all knew Sarah's trigger pull had changed their fate, and Sarah knew her life had taken a different path. When the chopper landed at the base, dust once again clouded the air. The shouts of medics filled the chaos. Stretchers carrying Kim and Santos disappeared into the trauma tents. Sarah followed, her hand still on Kim's pulse, until he was handed off to the surgical team. Her professional instincts took over, her hands swift, her voice steady as she reported their conditions. But inside, she felt hollow, as if part of her had been left on that dusty village ground. When all patients were transferred, Sarah found herself wandering the base aimlessly. The hum of engines, the clatter of training, the calls of soldiers all echoed as if the world didn't know the storm that had just swept through her. The normalcy was too normal, a burden in itself. Her feet led her to a simple building, the base chapel. Its wooden door was ajar, soft golden light spilling out. Sarah paused, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Inside was stillness. No gunfire, no rotors, no gunpowder smell. Just the scent of old wood, dim light, and a cross hanging high. Sarah sat on a pew, her hands clasped until her knuckles whitened. The image of the Taliban sniper's eyes returned, vivid as if he sat before her. That final blink would never leave her. A warm voice spoke from behind. "I heard what happened." Sarah turned. Chaplain Williams, a gray-haired man with a kind but weathered face, approached. A former soldier, he too had faced undefined boundaries. Sarah shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what I just did. My whole life, I've only saved people. Today, I took a life." Williams sat beside her, not rushing to comfort with easy words. After a moment, he said, "Today, you saved your team. The method may differ, but the intent was the same. Sometimes, God places us in situations where the right choice isn't the easy one." Sarah gave a faint, bitter laugh, her voice catching. "I became a doctor to heal everyone, no exceptions. But up in that tower, I shot a man I don't even know the name of. How do I reconcile that?" Williams looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "Maybe you don't reconcile it right away. Every wound needs time. But remember, healing and protecting aren't as different as we think. Today, you used a different tool, but your goal was still to preserve the lives in your hands." Sarah fell silent. His words didn't erase the haunt, but they carved a small space to breathe. She understood no one could fully explain or justify that shot. It would remain a scar forever. But perhaps, she'd learn to live with it, rather than deny it. They sat in the chapel for a long time. Sarah didn't pray, but the silence was a balm to her soul. That evening, she was invited to the SEAL team's debrief. In a small room, under dim yellow light, tired faces recounted every moment, every decision, every mistake. Sullivan, the seasoned leader, finally turned to her. "I've served 15 years, seen countless fighters. Today, you did something extraordinary. Not just the shot, but the decision to take it." Rodriguez set his radio aside, nodding. "My daughter will grow up because of that shot. Without you, I'd be lying back in that dirt." Anderson raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To me, it doesn't matter if it's a scalpel or a rifle. You saved lives with both." Sarah said nothing. Their recognition moved her, but it also sharpened the weight in her chest. She was no longer just a doctor. She had crossed a line. That night, in the darkness, Sarah lay awake. The sound of helicopter rotors echoed in her memory, mixed with the dry crack of the rifle. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the sniper's face, but alongside it, she saw Kim's grateful eyes, Santos's trembling breath, Sullivan's silent nod. She understood. This was only the beginning of a long journey, a journey to live with the two halves of herself that seemed to clash. 3 weeks after the battle in the Afghan village, morning sunlight filtered through the commander's office window, casting golden rays across a polished wooden desk covered in reports, files, and thick, after-action reviews. Sarah stood at attention, her back straight, her uniform crisp, her heart beating slow but heavy. Across the desk, Colonel Harrison, a man who'd given nearly 40 years to the military, flipped through the reports. His sharp, unreadable eyes seemed to weigh every word written by his officers. The room was silent, save for the rustle of paper. Each second felt like a clock ticking in Sarah's mind. She'd prepared for this meeting, but nothing could truly ready her. Finally, Harrison set the file down, looking up. "Dr. Martinez, I've read Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan's report and those of the team. What you did in that mission went far beyond a combat medic's typical duties." Sarah swallowed, keeping her gaze steady. He didn't mention the shot directly, but she knew everyone had heard. The story of the doctor who fired to save the team spread quickly in military circles, both a legend and a paradox. The colonel continued, his voice even but weighty. Your shot on the sniper in the tower allowed the SEALs to break the ambush. Without it, we might be holding a memorial service right now." Sarah clenched her hands behind her back. She wanted to say she took no pride in it, that every night she saw the sniper's face in her dreams. But she stayed silent. Harrison leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "Martinez, our military is evolving. Modern battlefields demand people who adapt beyond traditional roles. Sullivan's report highlights your unique ability, combining a doctor's precision with the marksmanship Thompson trained you for. A rare skill set." Sarah frowned. She'd anticipated this, but hearing it from the colonel made it heavier. "Sir," she said, striving to keep her voice steady, "I didn't seek that role. I joined the Navy to save lives, not take them." The colonel nodded, as if expecting her response. "I understand, but let me ask, if you hadn't pulled the trigger that day, what would have happened to your team?" Sarah fell silent. Images flashed, Kim writhing, Santos groaning, Sullivan shouting through the hail of bullets. She knew the answer, but speaking it felt like closing her old self's door forever. Harrison's voice softened, almost gentle. "You didn't betray your oath. You expanded it. Saving lives can take many forms. Sometimes it's a scalpel, sometimes morphine, and sometimes a bullet." Sarah inhaled deeply, her chest tight. He'd struck the core of her inner conflict. The colonel slid a file toward her. "Command is creating a new role. You'll remain the team's primary medic, but when needed, you'll also be a designated marksman. We're calling it a dual role. And Martinez, we want you to lead it." Sarah stared at the file, bold letters clear. "Pilot Program Advanced Combat Medic divided by Support Sniper." Her heart raced. This was no longer a personal anecdote. It was policy, a long path, a new destiny. She looked up, her voice soft but firm. "If I agree, it changes everything." Harrison leaned forward, his gaze stern. "It's already changed. Martinez, the question isn't if it's whether you're ready to lead." In that moment, Sarah understood. There was no going back. That day, in the village, had shattered her old shell, revealing a person she never thought she'd become. She looked at her hands, still the hands that saved, but also the hands that fired. Two worlds, contradictory yet bound within her. Perhaps her mission wasn't to choose one, but to live with both. Sarah raised her head, her voice steadier than ever. "Sir, I'll take the role. But on one condition. Every training, every deployment, must prioritize saving lives. A bullet is the last resort." The colonel studied her, then nodded. "That's exactly why we chose you." Silence filled the room. But inside Sarah, a storm raged. She knew signing that document would launch a new chapter 1 where every mission would test the line between doctor and warrior. As she left the office, the morning sun glared, forcing her to squint. In her hands was the file. On her shoulders, a new burden. Sarah walked, each step etching a truth. From now on, she wouldn't just heal. She'd protect and bear the cost. The months after Colonel Harrison's decision passed like a whirlwind. Sarah was no longer just a combat medic tagging along to patch wounds. She became something new, a figure wielding both scalpel and rifle. At the base, advanced training began. Sarah endured precision shooting drills with Thompson, learning to handle multiple tasks at once, one hand placing an IV, the other maintaining a sightline through a scope, or moving with the team in tight corridors, protecting casualties while holding a firing angle. Sweat-soaked mornings, long nights on the range all pushed her to her limits, but turned those limits into new instincts. Her first dual-role mission came sooner than expected. Syria, a crumbling building where hostages were held. The SEALs had to extract them, and Sarah went in not just with a medical pack, but with an officially issued sniper rifle. As the team breached, gunfire erupted. Sarah slid through a dusty hallway, hearing Rodriguez shout, "Hostage down!" She rushed into a dark room, kneeling beside a girl, about 12, with shrapnel in her leg. Blood soaked her torn dress. Sarah opened her pack, cut away fabric, applied gauze. Her hands were calm, her voice soothing, despite the gunfire echoing outside. Suddenly, Rodriguez yelled, "Enemy reinforcements from the north!" Sullivan barked, "We need 10 more minutes to evac the hostages." "Who's got the north door?" Thompson scanned through a window, then turned to Sarah. "I can't cover it in time. They've got an armed truck." Sarah looked up. She'd just finished a tourniquet on the girl, her heart racing. A decision flashed. She had a clear shot from the second-floor window. If she left her medical post for a few minutes, she could hold the enemy long enough for the team to escape. Without a word, she handed the patient to Anderson, who she'd trained in basic first aid, then grabbed her rifle and climbed the stairs. Through the scope, she saw the truck's headlights approaching. 3 armed men jumped out, ready to fire. Sarah inhaled deeply. Her breathing slowed. The shot rang out, the first bullet piercing the truck's tire, sending it swerving. 2 more shots hit the ground near the enemy's feet, scattering them. Thompson followed with precise shots, dropping the last man. In those minutes, a window opened. Enough for Sullivan and the team to pull the hostages to the vehicle. Sarah rushed down, lifting the girl, her hands still bloody, but her eyes steady. The waiting chopper roared, its rotors thundering. As they lifted off, Sullivan placed a hand on her shoulder. "No one else could have saved and fought like you did today." Sarah didn't respond. A strange feeling stirred. No longer just a doctor or a shooter. She had become both. More missions followed. Somalia, where she watched from afar and dropped an enemy preparing an ambush, then performed field surgery on a teammate hit by shrapnel. New Mexico, where she shot a sensor on an enemy-controlled drone, avoiding human targets, saving the team from detection. Each time, her reputation grew. In Special Forces circles, they called her Healer Sniper, a warrior who healed. A title both revered and unsettling. How could one person embody 2 opposing roles? One night, Sarah and Thompson sat outside the command tent, firelight flickering on their faces. Thompson spoke slowly. "I've seen many great shooters. But you're different, Sarah. You don't shoot for the mission. You shoot for the survivors. That's what keeps you from losing yourself." Sarah stayed quiet. She remembered her first shot, the long night in the chapel, the Taliban sniper's face. The scar remained, but each life she saved eased its sting. She realized, the question wasn't, "Am I a doctor or a sniper?" The real question was, "How far can I go to protect life with both?" The desert winds swept through the range, carrying the scent of dust. Sarah clenched her hands, feeling clearer than ever. The path had just begun, and she was ready to walk it, no matter the cost to her soul. News of the Healer Sniper spread faster than military transport flights. From small Middle Eastern bases to Pentagon corridors, from NATO command in Brussels to newsrooms in New York, everyone knew of the combat medic who took down a Taliban sniper to save her team. Some called her a hero. Others questioned, did combining healer and shooter distort the core values of medicine and warfare? Sarah knew the buzz swirled around her. But on missions, she tried to ignore it. Only back at base did the consequences become clear. In a closed briefing, Sullivan handed her a thick report. "Martinez, this is a compilation from military and academic boards. You need to read it." Sarah flipped through pages. Phrases leaped out. Potential ethical conflict. Risk of dual trauma. Model could dehumanize medicine. Some analysts warned that scaling this model might create killer doctors instead of healers. She closed the report, her hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but because part of those words echoed her own doubts. That evening, in the mess hall, soldiers whispered as she passed. One muttered, "Is that the doctor or the sniper? I'm not even sure." Thompson sat beside her, arms crossed, eyes calm. "Don't let outsiders define who you are," he said quietly. "They weren't there. Didn't see the lives you saved." Sarah nodded, but the doubt took root in her heart. Days later, she was called to a virtual meeting with a military research group. The command room's large screen displayed stern faces: generals, psychologists, ethicists. A silver-haired woman, Dr. Rebecca Torres, spoke. "Dr. Martinez, we want to hear from you. How do you reconcile saving lives with taking them?" Sarah sat straight. The question was the unhealed wound in her soul, but this time, she didn't shy away. "I don't reconcile them," she said firmly. "I choose in each moment. When I must save, I save. When I must shoot, it's not to kill, but to protect those I'm treating." Torres frowned. "But don't you see the danger? A doctor with a gun could become a tool to legitimize violence." Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes resolute. "I see greater danger in turning away at the critical moment. If I hadn't fired that day, my team would be dead. This path is hard, but I believe it's necessary for today's battlefields." The room fell silent for a moment. An older general nodded slightly, while Torres scribbled notes. Sarah knew she hadn't convinced everyone, but she'd defined herself in their eyes. The next day, civilian media flooded in. American headlines blared: "Doctor turned sniper, hero or ethical contradiction, healer sniper, symbol or warning." Some reporters requested interviews, but the military kept her shielded. Sarah only saw grainy photos of herself exiting a chopper, and online comments. Some admired, some criticized, some mocked. That night, she returned to the chapel. No Chaplain Williams, just flickering candlelight. Sarah sat, hands covering her face. She didn't fear gunfire, but she feared the whispers of public opinion seeping into her mind, turning her shot into a slogan for causes she never endorsed. The chapel door opened, Sullivan's deep voice echoing. "I knew you'd be here." Sarah looked up. He approached, sitting in the pew ahead. "Don't carry the world alone, Martinez. The only one who gets to define your actions is you." Sarah stared at her hands. One had held a scalpel, the other a trigger. She whispered, "If I lose balance, I won't be me anymore." Sullivan nodded, his voice warm. "Then hold that balance tight. And remember, there's a team behind you, alive because of you." In that moment, Sarah understood. The public could debate, scholars could dissect, media could sensationalize, but only those in the fire, those she saved, truly grasped the meaning of her shot. She stood, head high. The storm of opinion raged outside, but in her heart, a core of belief solidified. The first morning of the training course, the base's sky was clear, sunlight casting gold across the vast range. Dozens of young faces stood in ranks, uniforms crisp, eyes gleaming with excitement and resolve. Each was a combat medic, nurse, or medical specialist who'd volunteered for the challenge to become a dual warrior. Sarah stood before them, new insignia on her shoulder, a backup rifle slung across her back, her medical pack at her side. The woman who once trembled pulling a trigger had become a symbol for a program many still doubted. Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan, now overseeing the course, introduced her briefly. "This is Dr. Sarah Martinez. You know her from the news, the headlines. But starting today, you'll know her through every drill, every hour of sweat." He turned to Sarah, his eyes passing the torch. "She was the first to walk this path. Now her job is to guide you." 20 pairs of eyes locked onto Sarah. She took a deep breath, stepping forward, her voice clear. "I'm not here to turn you into killers. I'm here to teach you how to save more lives in situations where everyday ethics aren't enough." Silence fell. Sarah raised her rifle, placing it beside her scalpel and medical kit on the table before her. "These are different tools. One saves directly, the other stops death from reaching those you must protect." The tools differ, but the mission is the same: preserve life. Training began. By day, they drilled precision, shooting with Thompson, now a co-instructor. By night, they practiced field trauma care with Sarah, working on mannequins simulating screams, fake blood, and ticking clocks. During one drill, Petty Officer Lisa Chen, a former pediatric nurse, fumbled with her rifle. Her first shot missed the target entirely. She lowered the weapon, eyes welling. "I can't. I'm used to soothing kids to sleep. How can I aim to shoot someone?" Sarah stepped close, resting a hand on Chen's rifle. "I thought the same. I hated the idea of holding a weapon. But then I realized, I don't shoot to kill. I shoot to stop someone from killing my patients." She pointed to a bleeding mannequin on the training table. "If that enemy reaches us and I do nothing, this patient dies. But if I stop him, the patient has a chance. So what do I choose?" Chen looked at her, lips trembling, then nodded. Her next shot came closer to the mark. In another exercise, Sarah took trainees to the night range, having them suture simulated wounds while firing at moving targets. One trainee questioned, "Isn't this against the spirit of medicine?" Sarah paused, addressing the team. "No, this is taking medicine further. Medicine is about saving lives. War forces us to expand that definition. Otherwise, we'd stand by and watch our teammates die just because we fear firing a shot." Sullivan watched from afar, his face unreadable, but his eyes glinted with approval. He knew Sarah wasn't just teaching skills, she was passing a torch, turning ethical conflict into a philosophy of survival. After 6 weeks, the first group transformed. Doctors who once only knew scalpels could now hit targets at 300 meters. Shooters clumsy with sutures now stitched wounds faster than seasoned nurses. One late night, Sarah stood outside the range, watching new trainees fire under dim lights. Thompson approached, hands in pockets, voice warm. "You know, this might be your greatest legacy." Sarah looked at the young faces, heard the gunfire, the shouts. A mixed feeling swelled, pride, but also worry. If they strayed, the fault wouldn't just be theirs, it would be hers, for opening this door. She whispered, "I just hope they always remember. They shoot to save, never to forget." Thompson nodded, his hand lightly on her shoulder. "As long as you're here to remind them, they won't forget." Sarah looked up at the night sky. Stars stretched endlessly, the wind soft. For the first time, her faith and fear didn't clash. They merged into a drive, pushing her forward. When Sarah's first training class graduated, the news spread beyond U.S. bases to Brussels, London, and Warsaw. A classified NATO report stated, "The Integrated Medic Sniper Program increased survival rates by 32% in battlefield simulations. Recommend consideration for alliance-wide adoption." Soon after, Sullivan entered Sarah's office with his familiar smile. "Martinez, pack your bags. They want you in Eastern Europe." "Eastern Europe?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "NATO wants to test the program with Allied forces. You'll lead the training team in Poland, with trainees from at least 6 nations." Sarah froze. From a single shot in an Afghan village, she was now set to shape global medical tactical training. Pride was there, but so was fear. What if I'm wrong? What if I create a generation of lost doctors? The flight to Europe was long and heavy. Landing in Warsaw, she was greeted as a figure of note. Healer sniper signs appeared in local papers, mixed with articles of praise and criticism. The training base sat near the border. Trainees came from varied units: a German medical officer, a Norwegian combat nurse, an Italian doctor who'd worked in refugee camps, a Polish soldier, a skilled sniper wanting to learn medical skills. At the introduction, Sarah studied their faces. Some eyes were curious, some skeptical, some defiant. She knew not everyone wanted an American redefining their roles. She began simply, I'm not here to make you copies of me. I'm here to share what I've learned, sometimes through blood and haunted nights. You'll have to make it your own. Training commenced. Language was a barrier. Cultures differed. But pain and blood on the battlefield were universal. Sarah had them suture wounds in bone-chilling winds, then shoot in fog, forcing them to blend both skills under time constraints. One simulation stuck with her. Jan Kowalski, the Polish trainee, was treating a casualty when a moving target appeared. Instead of firing, he dropped his rifle, continuing chest compressions on the dummy. After the drill, Jan reacted sharply. "I'm a doctor first. I don't want to become a gunman." The class went silent. Sarah approached, sitting level with him. "I thought exactly like you," she said slowly. "But then I saw teammates die before me, because I only knew how to press a chest, not stop a shooter. I didn't change my nature. I expanded it. I don't shoot to become a killer. I shoot so my patients can live." Jan's eyes remained hard, but a crack appeared. That evening, he approached Sarah, asking for extra shooting hours with Thompson. Meanwhile, global media sparked fierce debate. The Guardian called the program a dangerous crack in war's medical ethics. Stars and Stripes hailed it as the future of combat medicine. Sarah received dozens of interview requests, all declined. The greatest pressure came from an international ethics panel, demanding to observe the training. The day they arrived, Sarah felt like she was on trial. Observers scribbled notes, eyes tracking every trainee move, from placing IVs to pulling triggers. After the exercise, a Swedish professor asked bluntly, "Aren't you afraid? If tomorrow your trainees use these skills to harm civilians, their blood is on your hands." Sarah swallowed, then answered without hesitation, "I'm afraid. But I'm more afraid of them entering a battlefield unprepared to save teammates or protect innocents. I don't give them the right to kill. I give them the responsibility to weigh every shot as I did." No one countered immediately. Sarah knew this was just the beginning. That night, she walked the base's corridors, hearing trainees laugh in the lounge. Thompson caught up, asking, "Do you think you're making a more dangerous world?" Sarah paused, looking distant. I'm trying to make a world where doctors are never powerless. The danger's already there. I'm giving them choices." Thompson nodded, saying no more. The 8-week course ended with a major simulation. Rescuing hostages in an abandoned building, treating casualties while providing cover fire. When the final team extracted, sweat-drenched but with hostages safe and casualties stabilized, Sarah knew they'd succeeded. At the graduation, Sullivan announced, "NATO has officially requested to expand this program to other nations. This is a turning point. And Martinez, you'll lead it." Applause erupted, but inside Sarah, another wave rose. "I've opened a massive door. Can I keep it on track?" On a cold Brussels afternoon, Sarah entered a NATO meeting room. On the table were thick files, covers stamped in red, Global Healer Sniper Deployment Strategy. The room brimmed with senior officers, civilian officials, and defense contractors. Sarah skimmed a page, her heart sinking. The plan didn't just propose training dual medics for special forces, it extended to regular infantry. Even paramilitary units in allied nations,